Holla, it's Preach! Hey guys, what's going on? Okay, by request, because I always like to give you guys exactly what you want, it is the Arcane Mage Guide. Now, I just feel a little bit like you guys have been trolling me. Just a little perspective here. My mage was the only class that when I started Cataclysm I didn't have at level 80, so I in fact deleted my original mage and re-rolled a Goblin Mage, just so I could experience the new content. So I have never played Arcane before. And I had heard lots of rumours from Wrath of the Lich King all the way through to the end of Cataclysm from our raiders, exactly how easy Arcane is to play. And then some people said to me, like the mages, no, it's not that easy. You have to do a few other little bits and bobs, and it's okay. I feel trolled, because I did a random heroic. I had never played Arcane before. I did a little bit of reading, spec'd up my guy, I went off to do a dungeon. And what did I find? Holy cow, is this spec boring. I cannot believe this spec exists in this fashion. But anyway, you guys asked for it. It's here. We're playing some Arcane Mage, okay, guys? So, I'm going to do my best, and I might even bring a special guest along just to say hello and keep things a little bit interesting. So basically, we're going to do the Arcane Mage. So let's look at our gearing. The only thing that changes between our stats from our Fire Mage guide, I hope you checked, this guy's 342 item level. He's not too shabby. He's got a few items that I picked up while just doing the videos for you guys. So the only thing that we really changed is that we dropped down our haste. Intellect is still our number one stat, guys. That's what's important. Intellect. You want to gem as much intellect as humanly possible, because we can't reforge to intellect, and intellect gives us more mana, more spell power. We're going to hit that much harder. So we need as much intellect from gemming, okay, guys? So you're gemming up your intellect. When we said with our Fire Mage, our next most important stat was hit, and that's still the case. We need to get our spell hit up there. We need to make sure our spells make contact with the targets, okay? So we're going to be reforging for hit. We're looking for that nice big spell hit cap. Where are we? There we go, spell hit. I'm 1.1% off just because my gear is not good enough to get up to there, and we don't want to be gemming hit, okay, guys? Especially at the loss of intellect. So I've got 15.9% spell hit. Not too bad. 1% below the ideal spell hit cap, but if you've got the gear, go ahead and reforge yourself up to there. And so what's our stat after that? So we've got our intellect and we've got our hit. After that, with the Fire Mage, it was haste. Not the case for our Arcane Mage, guys. We need to buff up our mastery. Let's have a quick review of our mastery very quickly. What does our mastery do? Mana Adept. Increases all spell damage done by up to 19% based on the amount of mana the mage has unspent. Each point of mastery increases damage done by another 1.5%. So, we get a damage buff based on how much mana we've got left. Not a number of mana, just the percentage of mana we've got left. So we need to keep our mana nice and high as an Arcane Mage. The more mana we've got, the harder we hit. Okay, guys? That's generally the idea and where we buff mastery up. So why else do we drop haste? Well, Arcane Blast, especially when we stack our buff, which we'll look at in a minute, gets very expensive when it's stacked up to 4 times. So we start using a lot of mana. The more haste we've got, the more casts we do, which then reduces our mana further. You getting the idea? So what we actually want to do is slow that cast down a little bit, so we actually hit harder and we don't use as much mana. What also we risk of is Arcane Blast is naturally quite a fast spell. So what we don't want to happen is under the effects of Bloodlust and raid-wide haste buffs, is that our Arcane Blast can actually go to 1 second. And it can never drop below 1 second on the global cooldown, guys, which means we're casting as many Arcane Blasts as we possibly can. So what we need to make sure is we keep our haste reasonable level. We're not going to reforge off haste, we're going to reforge off our crit. So any haste you get naturally from your gear is fine, but we want to be buffing our mastery up, okay, guys? So let me have a look at our gloves. We've turned our crit, which we don't particularly want, into hit. On there, I've just left it as mastery hit, which is awesome sauce. Moving down, we've gone and just turned our hit over there into haste, so on and so forth. Crit into hit, leave our mastery alone. Working down, all the same sort of idea. Okay, guys, on that one, I've reforged the spirit to hit. As we said, if you've got an item that's got spirit on because you had no other choice, go ahead and turn that spirit into hit into something useful. So that's our reforging, guys. Crit is your worst one. Get your crit down. Turn it into either hit or mastery, and if it's already got some mastery, go ahead and maybe turn that into a little bit of haste if you wish. Okay, guys, but just be aware that your haste can cause you to cast so much during what we call our relaxed phase, which I'll get into a little bit later, that we actually spend too much mana for our next burn phase, so we're not in an optimal condition. Alright, guys, so let's have a quick review of our talents. Okay, so we go into Netherwind Presence. We pick up 3% spell haste naturally from talents. We then get Arcane Concentration, which gives us a chance to enter Clear Casting. Clear Casting makes our next spell free. Here we go. We're casting a spell. We're not losing mana. Keeps our mana up. Keeps our damage high, okay? Nice, simple idea. Torment the Weak. Your arcane damage spells deal 6% more damage to a snared or slow target. We'll get into that further down the line, but just be aware that if a mob has a snare on it, we do 6% more damage. Improved Arcane Missiles. Increase the number of missiles fired by your Arcane Missile spell by 2, which is fine. It's just extra missiles. We will be using Arcane Missiles. Actually, I'm going to go into here first because that's the follow-on. Presence of Mind. When activated, your next Mage spell and casting time less than 10 seconds becomes instant cast. So it's sort of like activating it to fire off a free quick spell. Nothing wrong with that. Missile Barrage. Your Arcane Missile spell will fire at missiles every half a second. So we fire very, very fast missiles and more of them. Prismatic Cloak. Reduce all damage taken by 6% and reduce the fade time of your invisibility spell by 3 seconds. What we have with Arcane is that we do so much burst damage is that we tend to have some threat issues. So especially in our pugs, you might want to go ahead and do an invisibility, and that just makes it that much faster so you can get back out and also pick up some passive damage reduction, which is fine. Arcane Flows. Reduce the cooldown of your Presence of Mind, Arcane Power, and Invisibility spells by 25%. And most importantly, guys, reduce the cooldown of our Evocation spell by 2 minutes. We're going to be evocating a lot because this is a very mana-heavy spec for a spec that relies on us having high mana. You see the little hypocrisy there? That's where our little bit of management is going to, and believe me, it is a very little bit of management. So our Evocation spell is going to be key. We're going to be using it a lot of times in our fights. Arcane Tactics. Nice big fat raid buff. Increase the damage of all party and raid members within 100 yards by 3%. So we get a nice big fat 3% damage buff for everybody in the party and ourselves. Incanter's Absorption. When your Mana Shield or Mage Ward absorbs damage, your spell damage is increased by 20% of the amount absorbed for 10 seconds. In addition, when your Mana Shield is destroyed, all enemies within 6 yards are knocked back 12 yards. So when we have these shields up, guys, and we take some damage, we're actually going to get a spell damage buff, okay, guys? That's basically it. Improved Arcane Explosion. This is our only AoE spell, and believe me, you're going to use it very, very rarely. Reduce the global cooldown of your Arcane Explosion spell by half a second. Reduce its threat by 80% and the mana cost by 50%. So we have a nice cheap AoE that we can fire off. Arcane Potency. You can see there's not been a lot of thought going into this tree at all. Increase the critical strike chance of your next 2 damaging spells by 15% after gaining Clear Casting or Presence of Mind. This is what devalues crit in our gear, because we're going to get Arcane Potency a lot. So we get Clear Casting quite a lot. We get Presence of Mind on cooldown. So we're going to pick up this big fat crit buff, okay, guys? Slow. Now, this is what comes in from Torment the Weak. We gain this spell called Slow. So if someone in our party or raid group can't do a snare or a slow, we can actually put slow on ourselves. The more important bit is that it can also reduce the casting time of the mobs by 30%. So if you have something casting a big, dangerous spell, we can go ahead and stick slow on there. That's going to slow down their casting speed. It's similar to a Warlock's Curse of Tongues. That's what it is. So 30% is a lot of extra casting time. If you had a debuff on you that was increasing your spell casting time by 30%, you fucking know about it, believe me. Now here we go. Nether Vortex gives your Arcane Blast spell a 100% chance, oh yeah, to apply the slow spell to any target it damages if no target is currently affected by slow. So we no longer need to worry about slow when we're DPSing because our Arcane Blast will naturally put slow on. Okay, guys, that's all it is. So when we switch target, you don't have to think, oh, well, I need to get a snare on this to get my 6% damage buff. Arcane Blast is going to do it for you, making the spec even easier. Okay? Focus Magic. Increase the target's chance to critically hit with spells by 3% for 30 minutes. When your target critically hits, your chance to critically hit with spells is increased by 3% also. So this is a buff. We're going to look at who's there. So we're going to look at who's going to have a nice big fat crit chance with spells pretty regularly. Then we're going to give them our Focus Magic buff. It's a single buff. No other. It's not raid wide or anything like that. We need to pick someone in our party to take it, and that's going to give us 3% crit. Moving along, improved Mana Gem. Mana gain from your Mana Gem is also increases your spell power by 2% of your maximum mana for 15 seconds. This is why Intellect becomes even more important, because we've got so much mana as we get higher gear. Our Mana Gem does more, and it also makes Mana Gem a DPS cooldown. That's what's important there, guys. Mana Gem is now a DPS cooldown. Arcane Power. When activated, you deal 20% more spell damage, and damaging spells cost 10% more mana to cast. While Arcane Power is active, the global cooldown of your blink, mana shield, and mirror image is reduced to 0. Okay, guys, this effect lasts 15 seconds. So, we've got 2 DPS cooldowns there that we've just picked up in our last tier. We've got a mana gem, which is now DPS cooldown, and we've got this arcane power, which is a DPS cooldown. Just moving over to our fire tree. Spell criticals will refund 30% of their base mana. So when we do crit, and we've got that buff from arcane potency, we're now going to get some mana back, keeping our mana nice and high to buff our mastery even more. See how this tree's starting to work together a little bit? Burning Soul, reduce the casting time lost from taking damaging spells by 70%. When we mix that with a totem of Tranquil Mind, I think it's called a Tranquil Air, and what's it called? Concentration Aura from our paladins. It means when we're getting damaged, we're not going to be losing any casting time at all. We're just going to be able to DPS through that. We're not going to get our spell stuttered and keep our DPS nice and high. So we need that spell. Piercing Ice, increase our spell critical chance by all spells by 3%. So that's where we've picked up some more crit, further devaluing crit on our gear. Okay, little look at the glyphs. What do we pick up? Arcane Blast, increase the damage Increase the damage from your Arcane Blast by 3%. Nothing more said. We're going to be using Arcane Blast all the time, so we need that spell. Glyph of Arcane Missiles, increase the critical strike chance of your Arcane Missiles by 5%. There's just nothing better, guys. It's not a particularly great gift. There just isn't there just isn't anything better. And the most important one is this Glyph of Mage Armor. Your Mage Armor mana regeneration is 20% higher. So we will be using Mage Armor all the time, because Mage Armor regenerates our mana for us, and we get the Glyph, which means our mana is nice and high. We're not going to be using Molten Armor. We're going to be using Mage Armor just to keep our mana topped up as high as possible and regenerating as much as possible so it gets more benefit from mastery. Alright guys, nice and simple idea. Glyph of Arcane Power. While Arcane Power is active, your global cooldown of your Blink and Mana Shield and Mirror is reduced to 0. So that's nice and fast, especially it's more PvP-ish, I'd say. Not awesome, but we do need to move a lot as a mage, and when we move, we use Blink so we can start casting as soon as possible. Glyph of Evocation. Evocation also gives you health. Nothing special about that, but if we need to evocate and we're low on health, we can get some health back from that. The rest of the glyphs are minor things, and even these two are really minor anyway. The main three are these three here, guys. Make sure you've got those in. I'm going to do a quick review of the rotation just so I can understand these two phases for you guys. That's what's important. So we get our Mage Armor up. So we've now got our Mage Armor. We're regenerating a lot of mana. Okay, we've got loads of mana regeneration. So we have two phases as an Arcane Mage, guys. And just from very playing this, I didn't search this or anything like that. I came up with it entirely by my lonesome. Is that I created this macro, and you're going to love it. And I called it Nuke. Look at this. This macro casts Arcane Power, casts Presence of Mind, uses my mana gem, and casts Mirror Image all in one go. Alright, guys? This is our Nuke Macro. And I'm sure these modifications out there, like I said, I hadn't played this spec before. I came up with this myself. It seemed logical that if we want to blow all our cooldowns, if you've not seen the DPS cooldown video, go and check that out. It's on my channel. So we have this one macro that we're going to be using whenever it's up, which uses all our DPS cooldowns at once and allows us to burn. So I want to talk to you about our burn phase. What spells are we going to be using, guys? We're going to be using Arcane Blast a lot. Arcane Missiles, Arcane Barrage very rarely, and Flame Orb, okay? Flame Orb is still worth it to cast, alright? So our main thing before any boss is to conjure a mana gem. Very easy. And watch how quickly our mana ticks back up now, guys, because we've got this Mage Armor on the go. Very, very quickly. See, our mana is going well. Look at that. Boom, back to full mana. So what we're looking to do is Arcane Blast, and now we get this buff, Arcane Blast, and that stacks 4 times. Arcane Blast and Arcane Explosion damage increased by 39%. And when that's up to 52%, this proc you're seeing here is our Arcane Missiles. So we now get an Arcane Missiles proc. Okay, guys? Just have a quick read of it. Arcane Missiles activated. Arcane Missiles are a proc. Now what you notice is this uses heavy amounts of mana. Alright, guys? So I'm just going to stop casting for a second. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get this 4 stack of Arcane Blast up. Once we've got our 4 stack, we have a couple of choices to make. Are we in our burn phase, or are we in our conservative phase? What is the conservative phase, and how do we decide which phase we should be in? It is decided purely on whether evocation is off cooldown or not. So at the start of a fight, evocation is most likely off cooldown, isn't it? That's just simple. So how do we start a fight? Okay, so Raiders Trading Dummy, we're going to go into our 2 phases. First things first, our macro that we made also uses our mana gem. And what does our mana gem do? It gives us mana. How much mana does evocation give us? Around about 65%, okay, guys? Of our whole mana bar is given back by evocation. So when we start a fight, we're going to go ahead. We're going to go and get up to 4 stacks of Arcane Blast. 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to press our Nuke Macro. Boom, boom, boom. Use these the mana gem. You see we've got the mana gem buff. We've got Arcane Power. Now you burn your mana like crazy. We just start spamming 1. And we start getting a ton of damage. And all we're doing, guys, is pressing 1. Or whatever your binding happens to be for Arcane Blast. Until we get to about 35% mana. Like now. And then we evocate all our mana back. That's our burn phase over. And from here, we just Arcane Blast till 4. 2, 3, 4. And then we fire off our Arcane Missiles to use all that damage. And that buffs us up. And then we just carry on. And we just keep repeating this to keep our mana as high as possible. We don't want to be spamming too many 4-stacked Arcane Blasts. Because that's going to just eat our mana away. And we don't want that. And we just want to let our Mage Armor tick over. And all we're waiting for is our nice big fat evocation to come back off cooldown. And we're going to keep our mana nice and high. And what you'll notice, miraculously, is that our arcane, our evocation generally comes back off cooldown round about the time that our evocation is back off cooldown. That our rest of our cooldowns are ready. Alright, guys? Really is that easy. And if you're a little worried about mana, go ahead and fire some lower spells off. We generally refund a lot of mana, so we see we keep our mana as high as we possibly can. So we keep this 4 stack up. And then what you'll notice is when this comes, we've only got 55 seconds until our next burn phase. This is a conservative phase, guys. Just looking after our mana a little bit. So we're just going to keep chilling until 44 seconds is up. 3, just watching our stacks. I missed. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. This is it. This is all it is, guys. It's pretty incredible this spec still exists, I've got to say. So 30 seconds until our next burn phase. Just keeping our mana as high as we possibly can. We didn't proc Arcane Missiles, which is just tremendously poor. There we go. Fire that off. 18 seconds till we burn again. And this is it, guys. This is the whole spec. It's really... And this is for longer boss fights. What you'll actually see when I run a dungeon is that very, very rarely do we get to the stage where we need to actually do 2 burn phases. And we just keep spamming Arcane Blast. So our evocation is ready. Cooldowns, nuke phase. And then we just spam 1 really, really hard until we get low on mana. And this is it. This is our second burn phase, guys. This is really all it is. And wait till our mana gets nice and low and Arcane Power runs out. Go ahead and fire off your missiles. And then evocate it back. And then that was the end of our second burn phase. You got me, guys? That's it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into a dungeon. I'm going to try and make this as interesting for you as possible. I will do my best. I really will. Okay, so stick with me. Let's go.